She was warned. She was given an explanation. Nevertheless, she persisted.
Hello and welcome to The Persistence. This is She Who Persisted, the Nasty podcast. My name is Beatrice and I'm here with
Elizabeth.
And today we're going to talk about, as we, I think, promised last time.
Yes.
We are going to talk about Marsha P. Johnson and Brenda Howard. And the reason why I wanted to do that is that both were very important figures in the Stonewall riots and basically in the LGBT movement as a whole, but they're often not remembered or celebrated the way that they should.
Yeah, I mean, that's changing, but yes, I totally agree.
And also, we didn't want to do all like LGBT things during LGBT Pride Month because we don't think it's something that can be, limited to 1 month, but it should be something we talk about all year.
Agreed. We talked about this, I think, a little bit before, but we allot 1 month to Black History Month and 1 month to Women's History Month and 1 month to LGBTQ history. And those parts of history are just as much a part of global history and just plain history as they are LGBTQ history or women's history or Black history. Exactly. And so the more that we can normalize them as just, this is history, the better it is for our understanding of the past.
Exactly. So, yeah, it's July, but we'll still do Pride topics.
Yes. and I mean, this one is a nice intersection of Pride and of LGBTQ and other identities as well. Yeah.
Also, intersection of LGBTIQ history and Black history, but also her story, feminist history.
Yes.
So do you want to start with Marsha P. Johnson? Because that's chronologically the first.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So Marsha P. Johnson was born in 1945 in New Jersey. She said in an interview in 92, I think, that she started wearing dresses when she was 5, but stopped wearing them because she was teased and bullied, which is awful, but not surprising because people are, and especially children, can be terrible. But as soon as she graduated from high school, she moved to New York. The story is with a bag of clothes and $15.
Yeah. Also, we probably should say that when she was born as a boy, quote unquote. But she
yes,
her came out as a trans
assigned
woman.
gender at birth was oh goodness. I don't even pay attention to that anymore because it doesn't matter to me, but let me find it. Hold on. Yeah. It was male, and Marsha was born Malcolm Michaels Jr.
Yeah.
But anyway, one of the fun kind of things that I've read over and over again because everybody thinks that it's kind of a fun detail is that her middle initial was P assigned. I mean, she took the name Marsha P. Johnson for herself, and she said that the P stood for pay no mind because when people asked her what gender she was, she would just tell them pay no mind, it's none of your business. Yeah, which I enjoy.
Yeah.
So, transgender wasn't really a thing that we talked about in the 50s and early 60s when Marsha was exploring kind of alternate gender identities for herself. But she did use female pronouns for herself, and at times she referred to herself as gay, a queen, a drag queen, and a transvestite. And I think that's probably appropriate to kind of the time period. One of the things that I read about her was that she was very much fighting for her rights as a gay person, and the rights of gay people generally. Every time she would talk publicly, she would talk about getting her rights as a gay person, which I think is indicative of how people in the 60s and 70s were thinking about people who kind of had alternate gender identities, people who were just part of the LGBTQ community. So, yeah.
I think the word transgender didn't even exist back then, right?
I would say no. If it did exist, it certainly wasn't common.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting how people describe their identities with completely different vocabulary than we do today.
I totally agree with that.
And also that gay was kind of used as an umbrella term for queer identities in general.
Mm-hmm. And that queer at the time was kind of a slur and has really only since then been kind of reclaimed as something more positive and affirming.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she was known as being very, very generous to her friends. She lived in part kind of on the streets. She was also at times a sex worker. One of the things that I thought was particularly interesting and heartening about Marsha's story is that she and Sylvia Rivera actually started an organization called STAR, which was Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries.
Yeah. I heard about that. Yeah.
And it was a political organization that provided housing and other forms of support for homeless queer youth and sex workers in Manhattan. And I say queer, this is not the term that she would have used, not the term that anybody at the time would have used. They would have used transvestite or gay or, other things. But they basically created a home for young people who were coming to New York because New York, particularly the Greenwich Village area, was known for being very, gay friendly, despite all of the harassment from police. And they provided a home for them. And one of the ways that they paid for that home was through sex work. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so her sex work wasn't just a means of providing for herself, but it also was a means of providing for other young people who were going through the same things that she had gone through and that she wanted to help provide them with a better life, which I thought was amazing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm just amazed right now. I don't know what to say. This is really, it's very selfless.
Yeah. No, selfless is totally a way to put it. So she was part of once Stonewall. So we associate her with Stonewall. She's often kind of credited as being one of the first people who threw the first brick, though she in interviews after Stonewall says she didn't even show up until later. Other people say that okay. She threw a shot glass into the building that was on fire, and then they say that that's the shot glass heard around the world, which I think is also a fun thing. But she also says she didn't do that. I think with any type of quote unquote riot situation, there are conflicting reports of how people wish that it had been, and reports from the people themselves about either diminishing their role in it or, rectifying the facts of the situation. Yeah. Regardless of whether or not she did throw the bricks or she, was one of the first people there, she was definitely one of the first trans people to fight for their rights within the LGBTQ community, and she was very active in the gay rights movements in New York at that time. Mm-hmm. She she performed as part of a drag performance group, and she was an AIDS activist with the AIDS Coalition ACT UP, which, if you've ever seen the Silence Equals Death pink triangle things, that's one of the art things that ACT UP helped the Artist Coalition that associated with ACT UP produced. So she was actually so Stonewall, the bar, was only open to gay men for a very long time. And once the Stonewall Inn opened up to allow women and trans women and drag queens, etc. in, she was definitely one of the first women who was there and very vocal and very much part of that community. So when Stonewall occurred in 1969, there were two kind of nights of rioting. that were very intense. And like I said, she says that she didn't even show up until like 2:00 in the morning after the fire had already started, which again, it doesn't matter. Other people say at least on the second night, she did like drop a bag with bricks on it on a police car. I didn't ever see a place where she disputed that. So
maybe we should also say, just for better understanding, that Stonewall, like there were actually riots, and there were riots against police brutality against gay people.
Sure. So what was happening in New York at the time is that they would do periodic raids on spaces where LGBTQ people or folks would gather to catch people in the act of, like, you know, doing something that was legally considered like lewd and illegal, so that they could then arrest them. And so it started out as kind of just it was harassment basically, and the police would come in and they would harass people in the bars and throw everybody out. And people, by the time the 28th of June 1969 rolled around, they were really tired of it. They were tired of being harassed. They were tired of the police like coming into their spaces when they weren't doing anything wrong. They were doing exactly the same things that were happening in straight bars throughout New York. And so it was the 2 days of the Stonewall kind of riots were LGBTQ people rioting for the first few days, and then many days of protest for a week after that. The brutality and the harassment that was going on by police. It was an infringement on their civil rights as individuals, as Americans, and they were tired of it. And I think we said in our last episode that it isn't until this year, 50 years after the Stonewall riots, that the police in New York finally apologized for the harassment and for that, which led to the Stonewall riots. Yeah.
I think it's always important to remember that even now, as like when Pride is kind of this commercialized parade thing, it used to be a very political, like, riot situation, not a party.
Yeah, no, it's, I was just reading an article written by a young queer historian here in DC, and she wrote that, you know, we talk about Pride now, and it's a party situation, and the streets are often like lined with police who are supportive and who are protecting the LGBTQ community. But that's not at all how Pride kind of started out, because it was very much a protest against police who were harassing these same individuals who they're now protecting.
Yeah, yeah.
Stonewall happened. It was raided again, and they, you know, fought against it. But Johnson, after Stonewall, was a very frequent organizer and participant in gay rights protests. As I mentioned, she founded the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, or STAR, opened a homeless shelter for LGBTQ youth, the first of its kind in the country. And she was very active in the Gay Liberation Front and participated in the very first Christopher Street Liberation Party Pride rally on the first anniversary of the Stonewall Rebellion. The problem, one of the problems that kind of came up is that she was trans, and she was very, very much, the word I want to use is, she was an affront and very loud reminder that she was gender nonconforming, and that she was not going to fit into neat boxes that people wanted to create for gender in the United States and beyond. And so when in 1973, when they had another gay pride parade, by the Gay and Lesbian Committee in New York, they actually banned Johnson and Sylvia Rivera from participating in that gay pride parade, because they said, quote, they weren't gonna allow drag queens at their marches, saying that they gave them a bad name.
Yeah.
So